So in my last episode discussion, I mentioned that episode 16 will be a light-hearted one. Well, I want to apologize because I made a mistake. It turned out to be a very serious episode, and it revolves around Yor. And this episode is so intense that in fact, Yor almost breaks down and says that if she does not succeed in this mission, she may lose both Lloyd and Anya. And so this starts a very intense episode. And considering we know what Yor's profession is, we start getting an idea of what may be involved in this particular situation. And in fact, this gets more confirmed as Lloyd even starts noticing and starts becoming suspicious of Yor. And Bond even starts getting premonitions of Yor breaking down and crying sometime in the future. And so whatever happens, this is very, very serious. And the beginning of this episode starts after Yor finishes her day job and goes into, of course, her nighttime work. And we see a scarred Yor walking down the street with a very suspicious paper bag in her hand. And what's scary is that the paper bag is saturated with red, and she goes off to a very mysterious building. And at that point, she meets the person that this mission is involved with, and it turns out to be, of all people, Camellia. Yes, Camellia. You remember that lady who is a co-worker with Yor and always gives Yor trouble and bullies her? Well, it turns out that there may be more to meets the eye than these two just being co-workers in their day job. And there is something mysterious going on at night. So this does turn out to be a very serious and very dark episode, and I apologize for my statement that it was a light episode in my episode 15 discussion. No, wait. No, it is a light episode. Sorry about that. Yeah. It turns out that Yor is meeting Camellia, and she immediately attacks Yor because she sees the paper bag saturated in red and realizes that Yor has dropped all those bags of tomatoes that she was supposed to bring. And Camellia's like, how are you ever going to become a better cook if you keep on doing stupid things like this? And Yor continues to apologize to Camellia because, of course, without Camellia, Yor can't continue the cooking lessons that she's been desperately trying to do. Yep, that's right. Spy Family episode 16 is all about Yor's most important mission, which is to become a better chef. And why it's such an important mission is because it's an extreme challenge considering we know just how bad a chef Yor is. And of course, the consequences of her failure, which may be that she loses Anya and Lloyd, not because they will leave her, but because she will poison them with her food. Yeah, this is one of those extreme food episodes. You see it many times in many animes. And it always turns out in a very similar manner. But I do like the episode that we have in Spy Family because of many things. There are additional things that I really enjoyed about this episode that revolve around this terrible cooking challenge that Yor is doing. And I'll go over them as we go along. One of them is, of course, that Yuri comes along, and it's nice to see Yuri just because he adds even more stupidity to the entire episode. And we are not disappointed with this one because, yes, he contributes a lot. He almost contributes his life to this episode. But we, of course, find out just how bad a chef Yor is as we continue to go down the road, and Camellia is getting extremely upset over trying to teach Yor. And one thing I have to wonder about is, do you notice that every anime has the same final, really terrible looking food that comes out from the character's act? It's always purple, and it's always some mysterious stew-looking thing that's always kind of smoking up some purple-looking gas. I've seen that in One Piece during the Whole Cake Island arc. I've seen that in Ranking of Kings, and now I see it here. It's always the same looking, radioactive, toxic waste looking type of stew. And the results of anybody eating it is exactly the same. But you have to give dibs to Yuri, because considering that he is a Siscon, he would rather die than tell Yor that her food is awful. And the trauma that he goes through while eating her food and telling her just how wonderful it tastes. Yeah, just go watch it yourself. It's pretty interesting. But considering how confident Yor is typically with her nighttime missions, this one is a challenge to her. And today's episode doesn't really improve on her cooking. However, we do see a very interesting thing, which is a soft side of Camellia. She realizes that because Yor didn't have a mother when she was growing up, at least she lost her mother early in her life, she wasn't able to learn a lot of the domestic skills that a lot of people may learn from their parents, and yet she had to raise her brother. And so she actually becomes quite empathic towards them, and she gives them one piece of advice, which actually turns out to be great, because she says, you know, you have to cook with your heart, so why don't you tell me what you enjoyed about your mother's cooking when she was still alive? And with that, Yor and Yuri remembers this really wonderful stew that their mom used to make. And considering Camellia is a very good cook, she was able to realize what sort of stew it may have been. And so she starts gathering the ingredients of what she thinks the stew is. And through the careful instructions that Camellia gives, Yor is able to start making this stew. And we find out that Camellia is not only empathic in this episode, but she's actually quite observant, because she starts mentioning how Yor has changed ever since she's gotten married. There seems to be a warmth in her that never existed in the past. And so we see a different side of Camellia, which is very nice. And also, we start seeing this really nice relationship that Camellia has with, I think, who is her boyfriend. You know that gentleman who is Yuri's friend, who was at that party in the first episode? Yes. We get to see him again, and there is a very nice relationship that goes on between him and Camellia. But in any case, the stew turns out to be a success, and with that, Yor becomes extremely happy with the results of today's mission. So she returns back home and tells the extremely hungry Anya that she will be making dinner today. They weren't expecting that, and so they didn't prepare for the onslaught of a culinary disaster that may be coming out. But what they find out is that today's cooking is an absolute success, and when she serves it and they try it out, they enjoy it immensely. And it is at this time that we find out what Bond was seeing in his precognition, which is Yor crying. But it isn't crying out of stress or sadness. It is crying out of joy. And we see something that is extremely wholesome in the story. A lot of times this story will just end with this sort of situation, everybody's happy. But we find out that Yor is cherishing these sorts of moments. And this is the same sort of dilemma that you see from Lloyd as well. A conflict between their job and their relationship. Yor originally took this spy family position for the same reason that Lloyd did. It will help her with her cover. But as she continues to go on, she's realizing that she's appreciating this relationship far more than what is necessary through the work. And today's episode makes her realize that the relationship is even more important to her than ever. And so this turns out to be an extremely wholesome relationship in showing the closeness between Yor and Yuri, showing the strengthening of the bond between the Folger family. And of course, even the relationship that we see between Camellia and her boyfriend. All of this gives a much greater depth than just the disaster cooking episode that you often see in many anime. So I really like this very much. Now what's interesting is, aside from this episode, we also get a little bit of a bonus episode. This bonus episode corresponds to what is called Short Mission 2, these little tiny missions that are somewhat like author-created fillers. And the short mission basically revolves around Frankie. And once again, this gives a little bit more depth and relationship building. And in this case, it's between Frankie and Lloyd. Frankie has found a girl that he has fallen for. And because Lloyd is such a ladies' man, he has dragged Lloyd out to get tips on how to open a relationship with this girl. And the conversation is pretty funny because as much as Lloyd is a ladies' man, you realize that all of the way he does things is very logical. Everything that he does is planned out. And because he has such a photographic memory, he could create these storyboards of huge conversations that he will take with him to create a relationship with whoever his target is. Yes, Lloyd is a very scary person. But of course, we find out that Frankie is doing whatever he can in the way Frankie does it, which of course, in this situation turns out to be a little bit disturbing. A lot of people said he is a stalker. And to some extent, yes, what he's doing is stalking in the sense that he is investigating every private information that this girl has. But if you think about it, that's exactly what Frankie has been doing all his life. That is his skill. So for him not to do it here would be extremely unnatural. And it is Lloyd who kind of cautions him to say, be careful what you're doing, Frankie. But in any case, this conversation between Lloyd and Frankie turns out to be quite hilarious, but it gives Frankie enough confidence that he could go and try to create the relationship with this girl that he likes. And of course, we find out later that yes, he has failed. But the thing I really liked about this story is not really the story that he has with this girl, but the relationship that you see with Lloyd. You're starting to see what sort of relationship Lloyd and Frankie has. They're kind of always making fun of each other, but you also understand that they really do care for each other. So when Frankie becomes extremely disappointed and depressed and starts getting drunk at a bar, it is Lloyd who comes to help support him and get him through this difficult time. And so all of this was really nice. After a really tense set of episodes that we recently saw, it's really nice to see a different sort of episode where we're not really seeing a major move in the plot, but we do see a lot more revelation in the character and the interactions that we have. So I really enjoyed episode 16. And we already see from the trailer of episode 17 that we're going back to school again. Yeah, this one will be very interesting. So once 17 comes out, I'll bring out another discussion. I hope you join me at that time. But this is the episode 16 discussion of Spy Family anime. If you saw it, what you think about it, any comments will be greatly appreciated. And until the next episode, happy anime watching, and as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.